Yes, I was very honoured to be invited to read one of the stories, and I know it looks like a long story, but I've got very big nana font so I can see it. So these are the words of Bele Jebre Selassie, and her story was entitled Living My Dream in New Zealand. I was born in Aotearoa. My family moved to a camp in Ethiopia and stayed there for nearly 2 years. I came to New Zealand together with my family at a young age at the end of 2003. First we went to Mangere, and from there we moved to Henderson and lived there for almost 5 years. I was 10 at the time. I went to Ranui Primary School for 2 years. I needed a special status in primary school. In New Zealand, you should leave primary when you are between 11 to 12 years old, but because I didn't speak English and I didn't know how to read and write, my teacher advised that I should stay for 1 more year to improve my English. My teacher helped me with all the foundations that I needed to enter intermediate. I stayed only 1 year behind because I was getting older, and people in New Zealand ask, "How old are you?" And when you tell them, they start teasing you. I wrote a letter to the principal explaining my situation and why I wanted to move to year 8, and she approved my request. In 2008, I finished Henderson Intermediate and moved to Waitakere College, where I studied there until year 10. I was very interested in studying, so I used to work hard and try to improve my English. I didn't go to school back home. I started learning the basics here, from ABC to science and math. By the time I went to high school, I still had difficulties in English, but I knew the basics of math. I used to read children's books just to improve my English. ESOL classes also helped. I had that one-to-one help, and that was really good because they help students with writing and spelling, nouns, pronouns, and other parts of speech. Those are the basics of the English language that one needs to learn. It was hard for me, as I didn't learn it from a young age. My English improved through school. I received 2nd place for the top class, top scholar award in 10th grade, and I got almost 5 awards within a 2-year period. I was also given a special book only awarded to hard-working students. I was very happy for my achievements in school. In year 11, I moved to a different school, and that year was difficult for me. I had a lot of family problems. I still had an interest for studying, but because there was a lot going on in my life, I struggled with classes. I still got prizes for schoolwork, but it was a very challenging time for me. Some people have someone that inspires them. I have one too. My primary school teacher. She's inspired me in many ways, and I will never forget her. She knew that I had English language deficiencies, so every time we were on a break, she would tell her daughter and her friends to teach me something that I needed to know. She wanted me to achieve more, so she gave me all the help that I needed. She trusted me, and I trusted her. After high school, I went to the Auckland University of Technology, and I enjoyed studying health sciences there. I learnt so many new things. I got to experience life as an adult and learn to deal with things on my own. My first preference was to get into medicine, but having English as a second language, it's a struggle. I didn't get all the scores required, so I didn't get into medical school. I would very much like to work with youth. That's my wish. Some youth leave school at 16, so I need to promote the importance of education to them and its benefits in the long run. I consider myself a lucky person to be in this country. There are so many beautiful things I like about it. First of all, New Zealand is peaceful and safe. It also provides more opportunities for immigrants. When I say more opportunities, I mean that I get a lot of support from different government sectors, education, healthcare and housing. One gets student allowances and student loans to study at any university within New Zealand. The country has lots of opportunities for people who have the drive to go out there and do something with their lives. As a new immigrant in New Zealand, there are some things I dislike though. It is a small place, the culture is different. Back home, your neighbours are like family. They say hello to you, you say hello to them every day, and they come to your house and you go to their house and you share a lot of things. But here, you don't care who your next door neighbour is. Everyone is on his or her way, sometimes without any greeting. That's the only thing I don't like about New Zealand. People need community. You need people's support. And I know there is support, For example, if you go to church, that is where you can meet people, and there are youth programs, but I do not think that is enough. You need a lot of support in your society from neighbours and friends. For people who have no family here, they have a very challenging and difficult time. There is the issue of speaking English. If you cannot speak the language, they will make you study English to make it better. Some people don't want to study because they never studied back home. To tell them to go and study English, their mind might not be in that position. They came here to live in a safe country first, and they want to find work. And I know it's beneficial to learn English, but also to find a part-time job. I know some immigrants from refugee backgrounds who go to school, but who want to depend on social welfare assistance, and that's just not a good idea. Some people end up on social welfare financial support because they cannot find any jobs. They are made to depend on the government support because they don't have a job. I think that is why people don't want to stay in New Zealand nowadays. There is racism, and a lot of people move to Australia to work there. There are more job opportunities in Australia than in New Zealand. Here you find companies demanding experience for the simplest jobs that don't require any experience. My question is, how is a person entering the job force expected to have experience? I say give someone the work so they can show you their skills. According to the things I have experienced in New Zealand, I have advice for new settlers from refugee backgrounds. It's not always easy to settle in a new country, but you can be fine if you are prepared for it. Let your children use the opportunities and benefits after achieving a good quality education. Suppose you come from a poor country in which all you knew was war, hunger, diseases and other disasters, and you come here to abuse freedom and opportunities provided to you. Are you doing something for yourself? That would be a waste of resources that brought you here. Ask yourself questions like, why did you come here? What can you do for yourself? What do you want to achieve? There are many reasons for different immigrants to come to New Zealand. Refugees come to New Zealand to be safe and live a happy life. New Zealand is a safe and peaceful country. Whatever the reason that brought you here, you should manage your time and use it wisely. For older people, don't just sit at home doing nothing and complaining. Give your free time to communities by volunteering. Helping communities through volunteering doesn't require English language as a prerequisite, so get involved in volunteering programs. All you need is to find the right connections, build on your previous experience and skills to find whatever you want in your life. Everyone has something to offer. In New Zealand, you need to be brave to tackle lots of obstacles and challenges and difficulties to reach where you want to be. Whenever you complain about not having something in your life, there is a place and a time for that. Think, if I do this right now, what will be the consequences? All the people that I have met have different life experiences, different ways of living. They have suffered a lot in their lives, but in the end, they've got to where they wanted. Don't think too much about people who are bothersome to you. They are a distraction. Just mind your own business and move on. Remember that patience, resilience, and perseverance do matter. My coming to New Zealand is a great success. From a young age back home, I used to live on a farm. It was a hard life. The purpose of moving to New Zealand is to live a peaceful life, to get a quality education. There were a few times where life was tough for me and I was tempted to quit school to find a job, earn enough money and move back home, because in my own interpretation, back home you have your own culture, your own people, and everyone would be around me. But the question is, would I be safe if I returned to my country of origin? I dropped that idea. When I was a little girl, I used to tell my dad that I don't want to live in the countryside. I always wanted to go to the city, get an education and become a doctor. I wanted to have an educated husband and I wanted to have a nice house. That is the only dream I had, and I was given the opportunity to come here to get all of that. Here in New Zealand, I am educated, I have the dream husband I wanted, and I'm currently working towards getting my dream home. Mission accomplished. Thank you. So there are a couple of people here who are invited by the lovely Tiffany to be part of this process of sharing stories. I'd like to hand the microphone over to one of these people, the lovely Lynn Freeman. Her dulcet tones seduce us on a daily basis on national radio, and it's lovely to have her here in the flesh. Lynn Freeman, everybody.
Thanks, Jackie, and welcome everyone here. I wish I could welcome you in your own language. I don't have the words. I'm sorry. Speak a bit of French and German. That's my generation. These are the languages we learnt. But my hope is I have 16 great nieces and nephews, and they all are going to schools which are like mini United Nations, and this is around the country. So my hope for them, if any of them are in my position in a few years' time, they will have the words to greet you in the way that you should be greeted. Welcome to this discussion about resettlement and immigration and art and understanding, the many ways that our migrants, our refugees enrich New Zealand. The misconceptions though, the challenges and the opportunities. New Zealand, well, we're a land of migrants, stretching back a good 1,000 years, but we're still so young. This is the thing, and we've still got a very, very long way to go. Trying to be genuinely bicultural has been hard enough. And we're still struggling with that here. So maybe the fact that we aren't doing everything we could to be genuinely multicultural is understandable, if frustrating. But I'm full of hope. Having heard the stories, working with artists like Tiffany here, we have hope, absolutely we do. I was involved with Journey of 1,000 Miles both as a journalist and as a voice for one of the refugees in the sound part of the art project. And telling somebody else's very personal story was something we'll discuss in a moment. It was something very different for me, and at the start it felt like an appropriation of somebody else's story. And was I able to put into that story the genuine feeling and the emotions? Could I understand what it was like to walk in her shoes? I just met her today through that photograph. So it was a very thoughtful process for me, and I'd like to explore that further with Victor and Jackie and Tiffany and Abann in a moment. But first let me introduce our panellists. We have the caring creative, I think that's what I'm going to call you, the caring creative artist Tiffany Singh, Abann Yor from the Auckland Resettled Community Coalition, playwright, actor, bon vivant Victor Rodger as well, and we're going to involve Jackie too here. I think most of you were at the meal just beforehand. And I got the inspiration that I think the way we're going to change attitudes is through art and through food and through education. And I mean that really sincerely, because as a nation, one thing we do like to do is eat and try different foods. So let's think about that as a way also through art and food and education, changing things. It's going to take years, it might take a couple of generations, but I hope that by the end of all of this, we'll leave here full of hope. That's the most important thing. Tiffany, you explained just before about how your project started. I thought what I might ask you is your hopes for it. What did you hope when you started this, when you started to talk to Abann here and get this going? What were your hopes that your artwork could start happening?
I think most importantly, I hoped that I would be able to provide a platform for the resettled voice. I was very disheartened, no offence, by the media's perception around resettlement. And I think there's a responsibility to each other to foster communities that focus on well-being and social cohesiveness. And I don't think we're doing that. So for me, it was very much the opportunity to facilitate a space for some of the narratives that are missing to be heard.
And we're sharing microphones. And do you feel, I know it's early days, I know your work has a long life, will have a long life, but do you feel, spirit of generosity already, do you feel that you're off to the kind of start that you hoped for, that I'm sure you've been eavesdropping on conversations and talking to people about their response to it?
I do, absolutely. I mean, I spied on people at Headland Sculpture and Golf. I went up there a few times and just...
Were you hiding in the boat? Listening.
Is it not on? Is it now? No? Yes? Okay. And it was really interesting to me, initially, because it's on a sculpture trail, people were there to experience an aesthetic. I was unsure of how many people would digest the content. But I think because it was very sunny and the boats provided refuge, that there was an opportunity for people to stop and therefore listen. And I think the boats became really significant in that way. You know, it was interesting watching people turn up with their phones to take the selfie with the boats behind them, and then all of a sudden get kind of drawn into the content and understand that there was actually a lot more to this, and you could actually physically see that cognitive shift happen. And I think, you know, some people were quite overwhelmed by the content. I don't think that they expected to encounter that through art like that as much. So I think it was quite a powerful experience for people, and I think it's those powerful experiences, those personal experiences of connection, that have the ability to make those larger shifts.
Abann, we'll come back to how people viewing have responded, but I'd really love to find out from you how the people you work with have felt about this artwork and how they've responded to it and to having their stories told.
Thank you for the question. I think I need to highlight the background of the stories, how it's come about. I think that will give each and everyone a bigger picture about the stories. Regarding to newcomers and resettled communities, we have been trying our bit to give back to New Zealand, as New Zealand giving us opportunity in life. Within the system we find ourselves in the resettlement, there is a lot of challenges which is we are not used to. And coming to the new environment, new society, new system, everything new, has taken us really in a challenge way to overcome our issues. Within the ARCC is a group of community leaders that identified themselves within the resettlement, they're having similar issues. But what is important is that coming together collectively to have a voice where we will try different alternatives to fit to the New Zealand system. There we've been operating more than 8 years. What amazed the story where it's come from is that we are advocates, we're not a service providers. But our community members, they come to our office every day, every month, the same stories they're telling us. And within ARCC contact, we find out that it's not enough for us to just to hear the story without sharing it with other New Zealanders. From there, as a staff, with the community leaders, we've been having a composition to ensure that it's safe for us as our organization, as a member of the community, is that to tell our stories to other New Zealanders by ourselves. Because New Zealand has given us the opportunity or platform of being ourselves. Because sometimes the story, if has been told by someone else, it might not be received as what we feel about it. And that, the concept, this is where the stories come from. And collectively, within the ARCC staff, we've been dividing a different tasks in order for us to bring this alive. And just suddenly, the phone come from nowhere, where the connection just sparked up with Tiffany. And within that content, I would like to also to acknowledge for each and everyone who's been part of this journey, because without those who tell their stories, never been alive. Was the story writer Clarke as well is here. And also Naldo, our photographer. It's not just taking photos, but there is idea behind that as well. And the rest of ARCC members and the volunteers behind ARCC. To take it further, it was just last 5 minutes for my day, leaving on Thursday, I received a phone call from Tiffany. And she talked about the story because she saw the promotion in our website. And I asked her a question, where do you live? And she said, just nearby in Mount Albert. I said, my office in Mount Albert. And I said, okay. Already I closed my door. And I said, if you have 5 minutes, you can come along. And this is where everything happened. I don't know her, she don't know me. But the humanity, which is she cared behind her, and the work was ARCC, just something happened from nowhere. After our conversation, okay, tomorrow we'll meet. And then, boom, thing happened. By saying that, as an evidence of the generosity of New Zealanders, New Zealand as a country, this is what I say all the time, it brought the generosity to the light of newcomers and resettled communities. We help ourselves, we find others to help us. If we have many New Zealanders, which is some people who've been behind ARCC, even through my personal development or through the outreach work we have so far, we might not be in this museum, which is I need to acknowledge to say thank you for that. But to ensure you, we have a lot to do, all of us, when I say this, collectively. Because you're sitting here, you do care about our issue. And I do admire that. Not just you coming here just to listen, but there is something which is you can do in your own way. And I believe in that. So the stories is come alive as evidence that we are newcomers and resettled community. New Zealand is our home, and we're trying to contribute. What only is missing is just opportunity. Therefore, Tiffany, as one of the people who have the skill in terms of outreach, we come in a partnership. And that partnership is giving us the opportunity to have the Million Mile start from there. And I think this is the beginning. The show, not yet. Thank you.
I still want to come back to the question because I am really concerned to find out what this has meant to those whose stories have been shared in this way. Okay, one of the highlight we have, we've been invited to go to Waiheke Island with those whose stories had been read out. And the way how we technically we brought those stories to the audio is another platform of technical value as well. For those who read the stories out, because we've been talking with Tiffany how we're going to do that, because we the people have stories, we need to tell our stories. And I've been saying we need to connect with New Zealanders. It will be appropriate if we reach our side there and see who our side there can help. And she said, I got people in my mind. And she left, I think it's 2 hours, she called me back. She said, I sent email out, and I have everyone who can read those stories out. And then I've been able to connect with Naldo to send all the stories which is required to be read out. This is a new platform of telling their stories. So for those that have stories, when we reach to Waiheke Island, they hear their own stories, they start cheering because they thought it's not their stories, and they never imagined that the story will be in that particular way, you see. And even myself, I have my story there, but I didn't just forget my story, just concentrating on the community members who been participating there. And when I came back, I reflect on that emotion moment, and I called Tiffany and I said, you will not ensure what you have done to other people's life unless you see it yourself. Because what happened there is evidence, and what we do is really make a difference. It's not just for those who tell their stories, but for those who have the awareness that how to use appropriate terminology or the language, and hearing the stories from the people who tell their own stories. So that is what's happened. And that gives us also the platform that carrying on to tell more stories. Victor, you are one of the people that Tiffany got a very swift response from, clearly. When you were asked to be part of this, you're a busy man, I know, you're a storyteller in your own right. What attracted you to this project?
Tēnā tātou katoa, ma talofa lava, ma assalamu alaikum, ma khuhatet. What attracted me to it? You know, as a writer, particularly when I deal with kids, I'm always aware that there's always stuff swirling around, and there's generally a story the kids want to tell. And in a kind of tandem way with this, I just thought, you know, this is a way to hear these stories in a very human way. And I mean, I started off as a journalist in the 80s, and I always remember, even back then, being very conscious of, say, one paragraph for like 100 people that died in India, or, you know, a paragraph for 100 people who died in Syria, nameless. We don't know the stories, we don't know the humans behind that. And yet, you know, Western lives are given, you know, the 2 Americans, no offense to any Americans, that were killed in la 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 la, as opposed to the 100 that were killed in la 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 la. It just is a great opportunity to put a human face for us to the stories. Because there's, you know, and it made me think, what if? It actually made me think, what if this was me with my family and we had been displaced? What if we didn't know the language to the country that we came to and had to start again? And the thing that really struck me was, what if? Because this, I think, this is the thing that struck me the most in my story, but I think is a part of many of the stories. What if I wanted to give back to the country that has given me a safe haven? And what if there are obstacles to me being able to give back? You know, and Jackie's story kind of alludes to that too. That's the thing that really got me. And I have to say, you know, I have insomnia, so I cry at the drop of a hat. But, you know, I've been teary at about 3 moments just in this afternoon being here. The first one was over there for some reason, Tiffany, when you were introducing and I don't know what it was, but it's just, I don't know, I'm very moved by the whole thing. That's a very roundabout way of answering your question, but yeah.
We were talking, we travelled up from Wellington this morning about the idea of taking somebody else's story and putting it in your own voice and trying to do justice to a story that is hard to identify with and you don't know the person. I mean, did you find that? I mean, you have an actor background. I do.
But
it's not acting.
No.
We're not trying to pretend to be somebody else, are we, in this? We're not trying to put on an accent or something. We are ourselves, but we're trying to convey something.
Yeah, but I think it's such a smart idea that Tiffany had, because it, no, we're not, we are, yeah, I get it, why putting it in a New Zealand voice makes it more relatable for a New Zealand audience. Otherwise, the danger is the refugees just become a walking variation of that one paragraph in the newspaper of the 100 people who died in India, where you don't get the story, you don't have the emotional connection. You know, I had a very strong emotional connection to, I think Jack, from memory is my guy's name, and I had a very strong emotional connection to his story. And I remember when I was laying it down in a radio station in Dunedin, the person that was doing me the favour was like, oh yeah, come on, hurry up, we'll do one take, blah, 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 and was doing all her business. But then slowly she stopped and actually listened to the story, because she was like, oh my gosh, this guy went through this with his family. He came here, he wanted to give, he couldn't get a job. She was really taken with it, as was I. And as I presume people have been who've seen the exhibition and heard it.
Tiffany, I want to revisit when you were thinking about finding New Zealand voices, the New Zealand vernacular for these stories. So I mentioned to you I was in the Venice Biennale, and Julianne Moore and Alec Baldwin had been filmed by a South African artist, and they were telling the stories, the true stories verbatim of boat people. And you couldn't move in that room. It's a large screen. You could not get in there for love nor money. And I squeezed through and I listened, and they were telling these stories with great heart. But I wondered at the time if those people had been telling their stories, say, through an unknown interpreter, if that room would have been as packed as it was. And this is a similar concept to you. If you want to have the stories heard, you have to think about it. But I still look forward to the day where we can hear the stories told in their own voice. Yeah?
Absolutely, yes. There's 2 aspects to that. The first one was keeping the writers safe in terms of not wanting to objectify or subjectify them in any way. the second one was to enable them to be witness to and give them time and space to be able to offer their story in a way that they were proud of and felt safe with. And that came up when we were on the island, right? That people were like, that's my story. And there was this incredible sense of pride to be able to share in that way and communicate like that. The other one is the platform that you all give it because of who you are and the recognition that you have. People take it more seriously. So it was a methodology of being able to elevate the importance of the stories and really give them a weight through almost piggybacking off of your platforms as individual people. The other, when you look at the readers, they're also, a lot of them are in media, and that was a very conscious decision in terms of vicariously educating in a way that Abann and I, one of the primary conversations that came up from ARCC's side is language, that it's very important to shift the language refugees. You know, you're not a refugee when you've come to New Zealand. You've been given refuge, so you are now the part of the resettled community from a refugee background, and those language shifts are incredibly important. And those labels are very defining. So, you know, Abann talks about children who have been born in New Zealand who are still called refugees when they go to school. You know, it's really important to have an awareness around shifting these perceptions and educating. So there was a part of it for me, if I could get people in media to read these stories and have this insight, then potentially they could take that forth into their own platforms and shift those relationships through wider media contexts.
Very good idea. We can be slow on the uptake in the media. Jackie, I want to bring you in here. Victor and I have just been giving our views on that, and thank you for reading live. But when you got involved in this, what were your thoughts? When you read that story for the first time, and then you took on responsibility to tell that story, what was that process like for you?
Well, I was I felt very honoured to be asked to be involved. I don't see myself as having any platform. I don't think anybody knows me from a bar of soap. but what I appreciate, I think it's a very elegant idea from you to put something in a Kiwi accent, because some people stop listening and they don't listen. If there's any obstacle to listening, they will turn off. And I'm attracted to this project because I think as a society, we've come to a critical point where we really need to start caring about people other than ourselves. The way the world is working at the moment is people are just looking after themselves, and personal stories have never been more important, because I think it's very easy for people to be racist in a general sense, but when you put a personal story up against a generality, suddenly you can't, the walls come down. So the most powerful thing you can do as a human is to sit with somebody that you don't know and give them the opportunity to tell you their story. And I felt that, although it was sort of strange, I didn't feel like I was appropriating the story. I just felt it was my job to be as neutral as possible. And I was reading a story from a young woman. All I had to do was be neutral, not judge the words, and just be a young woman reading the story. And I feel that anything we can do to get those stories out there just improves the health and well-being of everybody. And I'm actually come from a history background, so I really believe in the power of collecting stories, and I'm so excited about this new aspect of your exhibition where people do have the opportunity to come in. Imagine that is just so cool. If people take up that opportunity, it's like, yeah! So, it's just very cool to be involved in something that you think might break down walls for people. That's and I didn't want to be... The other thing I found... Sorry, I'm blithering now, is I think some people have sympathy towards refugees, if they're wrapped up in a sort of noble savage thing, you know. And I thought, I don't want to do a deep and meaningful. I don't want to be worthy. We're all just people, and we find ourselves in shit sometimes, and we have to do what we can to get out of that and survive. And so people come here, and they're all sorts of people. They might be good people, not so good people. They're just people like us. So I just wanted to make sure that my reading was very neutral, because, you know what I mean? I don't want to have sympathy and charity conditional on some sort of putting people on a pedestal of being, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Worthy of. We'll help you if you're worthy to be helped. When we help people, when we reach out as New Zealanders, we should have no judgment.
Yeah.
It's just part of our responsibility to look after other humans.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Abann, the timing of this is interesting. I know, Tiffany, you've been working on it for a while, but of course now is election year. And what we're hearing through the media and through politicians is this, and I'm in Wellington, but here in Auckland is what we're hearing, is all this scaremongering going on, that we don't have enough houses and we don't have enough roads, and the problem is the migrants, and you can stroke that with refugees, that we cannot cope. And that must be a harsh and hurtful message to hear. Do you believe that art like Tiffany's, these conversations that we're having in a small way, like a stone in water that ripple out, but how do you feel you're going to get a positive message through all the negativity out there and the way the politicians are spinning things to their advantage? Big question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am here to take a big one. I think in New Zealand, it's safely to say that everyone have his own worldview. Regarding to politicians, it's a season for them to secure their vote to go to the parliament or to do their job. So they have their own right, whatever they're going to say. But in my personal point of view, there's a different side of the stories. First of all, New Zealanders, they need to know that any refugees come to this country is not their choice. That's the first element. They're not their choice to come to New Zealand. It's an agreement between United Nations, which is High Commissioner for Refugees, with the New Zealand government. It's a high level of agreement. That's first of all. And the reason for it is that for them to find permanent safety. Okay. The process is simple. Always, I put myself as an example. I left Sudan, I come to Syria. I seek my asylum there. I've been there for 5 years. To get the refugee status is a legal process. You need to launch the application in order for you to be protected. When you have been given the protection card, you lost your country identity. You don't have a country. You become a refugee. That's the real meaning of refugees. You don't have a place to call home. And that will qualify you to settle in third country. And to settle in third country, you need to have a danger things within the second country you live in, the country of asylum. Then the UN will act on behalf of you to find a place where you can settle, which is mean permanent refuge. So now, when I come to New Zealand, I've been granted opportunity to come and settle in New Zealand. Within the New Zealand law, to touch down in New Zealand, you need to have New Zealand permanent resident. And this is where I arrived to New Zealand. And this is how the journey started, from permanent resident being a citizen of New Zealand after 5 years. And what is really missing in our politician mind is that understanding of the process, first of all, and the humanity behind that. Because we used to highlight the issue behind producing refugees. Okay, it's an example. I went to the parliament in New Zealand with Amnesty International to talk about how the world can control the gun, which is people are killing themselves in poor countries in the world. And I've been asked a question. My grandfather had been killed by a gun. My father been killed by a gun. My brother been killed by a gun. And those things is not in my control. But what I ensure to the politician by saying, now I can do something about it. You can too. And for me, sharing the story with all of you in this parliament is for us as a nation to act on that. As a New Zealand, we might be a tiny country, but we have the ideas where we can contribute being a part of the global community. So for our community, for our politicians, they need more awareness in order for them to see the humanity part of the coin. Because what is happening is that when we talk about refugees, we talk about humanitarian. And humanitarian is about someone have a social problem need to be fixed. It's not about the dollar coin about it, because it become international global business. As a New Zealand, we're not in a position to promote vulnerability, to promote the struggle of people in order for us to secure the resource which we can help people. Our role is to act and promote humanity. That is what the value of New Zealand, not I think, but what I experience as being a New Zealand citizen. So that is our space. And that's what I can share with all those politicians. When we talk about refugees, it's about helping other humans to be safe, nothing else. If you talk about economic, just forget it. And that's what they need to hear.
Well, let's pick up on that, Tiffany. This is exactly what we've been talking about here, the message that you're trying to get across in election year at this time when there's a lot of negative information out there. Can you feel that you can cut through with projects like this?
I feel that I can try. Social practice is an interesting entity. You're not in control totally of the outcomes. So that's where the intention and the ethics come into play. That I just have to be motivated from a really good place and be willing to work through the challenges that social practice brings with it, which, there are many. And it has a really strong ethics to it. So I think it's really operating within a tight framework that I put around myself to make sure that I'm focused with the right intentions to do the best that I can in a way that is very respectful of the people who I'm working with, because it's, for me, it's their work. As much as it is mine. So in terms of authorship and ownership, I don't have that. It's a space. It's facilitating and providing a space for other people is my job. My larger artistic inquiry is really a conversation between the role contemporary art has in relation to health and well-being. And I think that's something that we're not exploring very well in New Zealand. I don't think that we value the arts in terms of what it can provide as alternative means to education in relation to creating and fostering healthier communities. And what it provides is something that's largely overlooked. So it's also a platform to have those conversations and raise awareness around social practice as a contemporary arts form. And the social political role that it plays within that.
One more question from me and then we'll throw it open to the floor. Victor, this one's for you. Again, something we were talking about coming up is this definition of home. And when I was reading the material around here and wondering when for our refugees they start to feel welcome enough to feel Kiwi or to feel that this is home. I mean, I live in Wellington, but my home is Dunedin. It's where I was born. My parents are buried there. It's where I'll be buried. So I've had that home my whole life. I know where it is. I haven't had to make a choice between a homeland and somewhere where I'm told, as you say, that is where I'm now going to be based. So I mean, I don't know if it's got you thinking, it certainly has me, Victor, thinking about what home means to us and what home means to our recent New Zealanders.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, my grandmother was Scottish, and she left Scotland when she was 9 in the 1920s. and always considered Scotland home until her death. But I'm also mindful of, there's a Toi Whakaari New Zealand Drama School graduate called Batanai, and I'm not sure where she's originally from, but she came to New Zealand when she was 5, resettled. So home to her, I mean, not that I really want to speak for her, but having spoken to her, home now is New Zealand for her. Absolutely it is. And the thing for her is that she's very conscious that her bit, her story has not been told yet, in terms of the born there but brought up here, and feeling Kiwi, looking not traditionally Kiwi. When most people think of we, they don't normally think of her, perhaps. And I'm really excited that in the future she will be somehow telling her bit of that story. But yeah, home, interesting.
Interesting too, don't you think, to see, and when I was listening to your story, Jackie, that you were reading out, to see ourselves through another's eyes, you know? A beautiful country, safe, yes, tick, you know, beautiful, yes, tick. Not as friendly as it could be, not as community oriented as it could be. I think that's a very valuable thing, that the stories are turning on us to think about our lives.
I think the stories are a great way to encourage us to think in 3D, you know, because I think for a lot of people, they just think 1D. And particularly in terms of people that they don't know, but this is such a great way to think 3D. As we're all 3D, you know, sort of like what you're saying, Jackie. We're all 3D, and this is why I love it. It's great, Tiffany, it's great.
It is, it's a great project. Look, we've got time for questions from you. We have these lovely microphones to pass around, but we'd really value your questions. It's a great opportunity. We have the artists, we have Abann here, Victor, Jackie and myself. Any questions that you'd like for us would be very, very welcome. Don't be shy. Great, can we get the microphones? Fabulous.
Hi. It's not exactly a question. It's regarding something you said. I honestly don't think any intelligent New Zealander thinks that refugees are to blame for the housing crisis. And because there's not any refugees going to come and buy $1 million homes in Auckland, to be honest. No one thinks that. It's the economical immigration. When you tell by my accent, I'm from the north of England. My mother was Scottish. My father was Welsh. My wife's Dutch, and we've lived here for 26 years, you know, so it's, you know, we're all, but I don't think anybody blames refugees for what's happening at the moment. No one. That's all I want to say. I think by saying that, I think you're making a point that's not true. Sorry.
Well, I guess, no, I apologise for that. I'm a journalist, so, you know, I'm not used to telling the truth, maybe. But I think also there is a degree of ignorance where it's like we are New Zealanders, and other people coming in are other people, and they're getting in our way, and they're taking our jobs, and they're taking our homes. So I'm not saying it's the truth. I'm talking about perception, and it is about them, and it is about us. And that was the point I very clumsily was trying to make. So I apologise.
No, it's all right. That's tell you my point. But I think, yeah.
Just picking up on what was said there, because I'm an immigrant, also from England, and I'm just curious as to the number of stories that have been told. How many of those have been from European descent as opposed to non-European descent? I would imagine it's pretty skewed. I don't know.
In the new work, you mean? Where's James? Hi. How many stories have we collected so far?
I think it's about 120 new stories. And to answer your question, I would say you can see from the graphic that, it's skewed more towards Europe. If anyone's American, feel free to send me a story. But more Europeans from this lot. But also, Middle East and some other places as well.
It's also, the work will also travel. So it will be installed in Wellington and in Christchurch. So it's an ongoing work that will hopefully at some point have an online aspect to it where people can upload stories also. So it's really much about it being a living, collecting entity that will grow over time, because it becomes, retrospectively in 10 years' time, it could be a really significant archive of contemporary immigration. The interesting thing about James's very clever design of the digital interface is because it's on a touch screen, it really appeals to the younger generation. So we've got a lot of young children's stories, like 5, 6, 7-year-old stories, from a different perspective, which is really beautiful. So it's really lovely that it has the ability to kind of tap into this very recent, young connection and experience of that story too.
Can I congratulate you for the concept and good luck with the exhibition as it goes on.
Thank you.
Lynn had a question?
Right, I'm not sure if I can get this into a question, but
Is this working?
yeah, okay.
You all have wonderful accents, by the way.
Right, I've been here for some time, and in New Zealand, and I travel on a New Zealand passport, and I'm interested at what point you stop being an immigrant or in that category, and you identify yourself as being a New Zealander, which I do, but I find that I'm more accepted as a New Zealander amongst my immigrant friends than I am amongst the first, second, third generation New Zealanders. And I sometimes feel a fraud because I didn't get socialised here. And I'm just wondering how your experiences are with regard to identifying as New Zealanders.
I'll respond to that. First of all, illegally, I identify as a New Zealander when I get permanent resident to live here for all my life. Secondly, I'm a citizen of New Zealand, presenting New Zealand overseas. I was not waiting to someone to tell me I'm a New Zealander or not, because I need to be myself, first of all, because I can't pretend to be someone else if I don't be myself. This is what I consider myself as a New Zealander. Secondly, my children, they're born in New Zealand, and they never see where I come from. Just they hear their stories. This is their home. I'm the one who will tell them their stories, their home. With my cultural background or understanding in my own mother tongue, we all in this world, we are just temporarily living in this world, which is mean translate in my own language, we are refugees. Our permanent place when we die. So for me, wherever I go and I have a legal status wherever I can be, I'm part of that. And I need to prove it to the people around me, I'm part of them. Not them to tell me I'm part of them. That's what I see it.
Great answer. We've got time for one more question.
Yes, can you hear me? Abann, I heard you say before that many people come into your Mount Albert office with different stories. I'd like to know some of them. What's the main thing? What do they want of you in your office?
This is what it's really, I didn't know that, because through the experience and practice, this is what I start knowing myself, what my role is. For our community, being a community leader, you multiply a lot of head you wear. Sometimes I become mediator, solving marriage's problem, distribute problem. Sometimes I play a role of counselor. Sometimes being a community leader. Sometimes being advisor, cultural advisor for the services who are working with the refugees background. Sometimes there is a lot of layout, the role which is I was playing. But the most important part of this is that about the well-being of those people who are telling me their stories. And their stories has been just around my office or around ARCC, and the rest of other New Zealanders that can't hear it. And the most important was that because as an advocate or organization, we share all those stories through our reporting to Immigration New Zealand to solve the problem. But many of the problems are never been solved. Family unification, housing, employment opportunity, health. So what is happening is that if we take these stories outside there are a lot of generous Kiwi outside there that can lean a hand to whoever a story has been heard. And that is where the idea of a story need to be brought to the public. And the other things was, we're telling our stories ourselves. It's a platform of introducing ourselves to other New Zealanders in order for them to understand where we're coming from. Because there is a lot of outside in the media there, negativity, which is damage our image as a people, ourselves. So what we're trying to see is that there is a gap within the services within New Zealand. So we are fulfilling that gap as our organization by bringing our contribution to the people so that they will know what the reality is. Because the story that has been told outside there is not from our perspective, from other perspective. So that is where the stories has been come along alive within the ARCC context. And by saying that there are many people still, they fear for their life, that's why many of the stories are never being brought out. We have a lot of stories, we still have them, because without consent of the person, we will not publish it, because they still fear for their life. And when I start the story to be published, I start from my own story in order for them to trust what I'm trying to do is not a commercial thing, but it's to change the perception and aware other people about where we're coming from. Because there is a say, if we want to be part of New Zealand, we need to share our stories with our New Zealanders so that they can accept us or understand where we're coming from, so that we can engage. So that is the idea behind it.
Thank you very much for that. Our hour sadly is up, but there will be a chance for more conversation, asking questions, and open platform is, beyond a lot of people. So I'd like to thank you all, first of all, for coming along, and our wonderful panellists. Tiffany, congratulations, another fantastic artwork. Looking forward to talking to you about the next one. You're always on the move. Abann, thank you so much for your honesty and for being involved in this project. Victor, thank you for lending that beautiful voice of yours to this project and your heart and soul. Jackie, the same also for you. And have a wonderful afternoon. I hope you can stay for a conversation. Thanks, everybody.